G'day, we're on holiday until Friday, July 11, when we'll be back with episode 417 of The Other Side for 2025. But right now, here's a flashback clip from the first half of the year.
British people used to deal with crime by moving the criminals to Australia. Now British people deal with crime by moving to Australia.
I wanted to bring you, in particular, the speech by Constantine Kissen. He's a much-loved Soviet Union-born British comedian and political commentator, and he's co-host of the very popular, hugely popular podcast online, the Triggernometry show. And his warnings about the illiberalism of woke ideology, the tyranny of identity politics that we've all been living under, are very, very well known to his fans. His opening speech at the first ARC conference a year or so ago absolutely went viral all over the internet, and he was back for more serious comedy this year.
I love this country, and I say so publicly, which is how you know I still haven't integrated into British culture. Last time we were here, you might remember I opened my speech with this quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I bring it up because it's still true.
Just want to stop it there for a moment and really ponder and show you that quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn that Constantine Kissen shared with the crowd there. Now, Solzhenitsyn died in 2008 at the age of 90. He had won the 1970 Nobel Peace Prize for Literature, and his non-fiction classic called The Gulag Archipelago is a book that's often quoted by Jordan Peterson as one of the biggest influences on him and his life. It was described as a head-on challenge to the Soviet state, and it sold tens of millions of copies all around the world. Solzhenitsyn was a Soviet and Russian dissident and author, and he really did help to raise global awareness of the political repression in the Soviet Union, especially in the terrible Gulag prison system. So let's have a look at that quote together now. The strength or weakness of a society depends more on the level of its spiritual life than on its level of industrialization. Neither a market economy nor even general abundance constitutes the crowning achievement of human life. If a nation's spiritual energies have been exhausted, it will not be saved from collapse by the most perfect government structure or by any industrial development. A tree with a rotten core cannot stand.
Because one of my many critics after my speech claimed that in quoting Solzhenitsyn in this way, I was comparing myself to him. Now, this is, of course, ridiculous. Alexander Solzhenitsyn spent years in a hard labor camp where he endured a starvation diet, brutal punishments, and a complete deprivation of his liberty. I went to a British boarding school. That's where the similarities end.
Kissen went on to say that the tide is turning globally against woke, being led by the United States.
DEI, a system of anti-meritocratic discrimination, is being dismantled, not just in the American government, but much more importantly for us here, in the global corporate world as well. Once again, we can dream that our children will be judged on the content of the character and not the color of the square they post on Instagram. Government profligacy and corruption is being exposed on an industrial scale. Those may not be perfect, but according to one report, USAID gave $3 million to a rapper in Gaza who makes anti-Semitic songs. Now, whatever your politics, we can all agree that's a waste of taxpayers' money. Kanye West would have done it for free.
Constantine says that because of the end of heavy censorship on Twitter, X, since it was taken over by Elon Musk, that we can now express a diversity of views and opinions, and it's forcing other social media companies to follow suit, companies like Meta. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg, for example, suddenly seeming to care so much about the only diversity that truly matters, the diversity of opinion and ideas.
Now, it's true, we haven't yet won the argument on freedom of speech here in Europe. I thought the most hilarious example of this was last week, when J.D. Vance gave a speech in Munich in which he criticized European leaders for trying to shut down speech that they don't like. The reaction? A German politician stood up and went, "This is unacceptable!"
Constantine says that while there have been a lot of positive shifts in the past year or so away from woke, there have been a few negatives in our societies in the West as well, like the rising rates of crime, particularly in the United Kingdom.
British people used to deal with crime by moving the criminals to Australia. Now British people deal with crime by moving to Australia. The number of testicular injuries in women's sports is through the roof. I don't think this is a laughing matter. We can all agree women's safety is incredibly important, which is why we must do a much better job of protecting their balls. See, it's jokes like that that get me accused of being a conservative. And I hate it when people call me a conservative because I have made many mistakes over the last 14 years, but even I haven't let in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants. And look, I know it's hard to say anything about that issue without being put in the bigger box. So let me just say, I empathize with and totally understand the motivations of the people who come here across the English Channel on smoke boats. I wouldn't want to stay in France either. See, I lied. I have integrated into British culture. But look, I also hate it when people call me a conservative because it shows that they're missing my point. I don't believe that Western values and the societies they created are great because of an ideology or because of party affiliation. I believe our values and our societies are great because I've got eyes. When I look at the fact that millions of people risk their lives to come here every year and no one is going the other way, that tells a story, doesn't it? I know there's a lot of frustration with the state of this country and much of the Western world, but let's keep things in perspective. Of all the things that human beings have invented over the last 200 years, our culture and its values are responsible for most of them. I'm not saying we have a monopoly on genius. There are exceptions, like COVID. That was invented in China. Oh, it's controversial. Look, I know it's a controversial joke. In my defense, it's not a joke. COVID was clearly a Chinese virus. Hard-working, made on the cheap, and very good at multiplying. One of the simplest things that most people no longer understand is that we don't lead the world on innovation because we're richer. We are richer because we lead the world on innovation.
Constantine Kissen says all of this is at risk because of the danger of us forgetting how we actually got here. That the success of Western civilization has to do with the efforts of our grandparents and their grandparents. But the current state of young people and others in our societies today, he says, is a bit like the impotent king character from The Lord of the Rings.
It's King Theoden from Lord of the Rings who sits on his throne, paralyzed. Bound to his seat by lethargy and passivity, he's kept there by a weaselly servant called Grema Wormtongue, who whispers dispiriting, cowardly lies in his ear. Too many people on our screens, our newspapers, in our schools and colleges have been modern-day Grema Wormtongues, who pour their cowardly lies in our ears and those of our children. If Grema was alive today, he'd have his own column in The Guardian. We need to admit something very unpleasant. We have been lied to. For decades, people went on TV and told you that your history's all bad and your country's plagued by prejudice and intolerance. I have debated these people many times, and I always ask them the same question. If you were a woman or an ethnic minority or someone who was spirit, gender, or whatever, where would you rather live than the West? And none of them ever answer, because we all know the answer. We are being accused of performing terribly on the very things we lead the world in. A healthy sense of your own self-worth, a self-confidence. These are not conservative values or liberal values. Those are the values of every successful group of people in history. Decline is a choice. And the good news is this: most people don't want managed decline. Most people don't want to be browbeaten and chastised for their history. Most people do not want their children to be poorer than them. And recent election results around the world bear that out. Like him or loathe him, the reason millions of people admire Elon Musk is not his charismatic speeches, stunning good looks, and ill-advised hand gestures. They admire him because he builds big things, and in doing so, reminds us that we are meant to reach for the stars. A big part of the reason we are here, 4,000 of us, is that an obscure Canadian clinical psychologist became such a unique cultural phenomenon that he can help to pull us together like this. And how did Jordan Peterson get so big? How did he get so big? He reminded us of something that human beings have known for millennia, that if you adopt the attitude that honesty is better than lies, that responsibility is better than blame, and that strength is better than weakness, your life will get better.
That's Constantine Kissen speaking at the ARC conference in London last week. He says one of the main arguments that we've got to win is the battle against anti-humanism. That because of a book written in 1968 by an academic by the name of Paul Ehrlich called The Population Bomb, the thesis became very popular that the human population was about to outstrip food supplies, leading to mass starvation and societal collapse. All Ehrlich's ideas became so popular among academics and the bureaucrat class in the West that they still persist today, even though history has proven him to be completely wrong. Human ingenuity has actually enabled mankind to grow and to thrive, and poverty has never been lower around the world. These are actually fantastic times, but you'd never know it. The last thing that we need right now is any centrally managed global mass movement to save humanity. Because of some disproven academic theory based on a very narrow and limited idea of what humanity actually is and why it is. But the simplistic and foolish ideas of Paul Ehrlich live on today in the climate alarmism and the net zero agenda.
At the core of the net zero agenda is a fundamental sense that human beings are a pestilence on the planet. That if only we could stop them reproducing and encourage them to die out peacefully, the planet would finally be safe. This has become so ingrained that many people now say they will not have children because of climate concerns. We must never get used to this because it represents a grotesque moral inversion. The birth of a child is a universally celebrated thing. And at a cultural level, any successful civilization would see more of itself being created as an unalloyed good. What do you imagine happens to civilizations that don't? So we must say, without apology, the solution to climate change can't be poverty.
He's sadly right. Britain right now is in the grip of skyrocketing energy prices that are actually killing people. Old people who can't afford to even heat their homes in winter. And this is an abomination that's happening in the wealthy Western world. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, just like our ABC and Canada's CBC, runs story after story about how the battlers are struggling to cope and how tough it is meeting the energy bills today. And it is. Those stories are real and true and they need to be covered. But they don't get to the reason for this. They pretend that it's all about something like the Ukraine war and gas shortages. It's actually about the appalling energy mismanagement by utterly useless, ideologically driven bureaucrats who are running our governments. It's about the lunatic ideologies that are being peddled by media organisations like the BBC and the ABC, that humans are bad, that industry is bad, that capitalism is bad, that innovation and free market economics is bad. All that neo-Marxist nonsense that's spewed at our kids constantly through their education and on social media and the mainstream media, that is what is actually killing poor people. And it's not just poor people in poor countries who can't afford to find the energy to, cook a meal to feed their families. It's people in our own developed nations. It's absolutely obscene. And these petty bureaucrats, they seem to ignore, mysteriously, the incredible good, the amazing good that's come from free market liberalism and that Western civilization has achieved in recent decades particularly. You've only got to consider one statistic, and that's infant mortality. Infant mortality alone, to see how far we have come because of industrialization and Western civilization. 40% of us would not be alive today if we had been born before the Industrial Revolution.
Before the Industrial Revolution, nearly 40% of children died before they hit puberty. That means 2 of the 5 people next to you would be dead right now. Now, there are a lot of people outside this room who'd be happy about that. My point is, the promise of that better tomorrow is not just a nice thing to have. It's the debt we owe our children. We have to make energy cleaner, yes, but we also have to make it as cheap and abundant as possible. And once we in Europe win that argument, we will finally have the one thing that's been missing: an economic vision that can inspire people to believe that the future will be better than the past. Now look, they asked me to say something uplifting and motivational. I'm Russian, Ukrainian, British, and a little bit Jewish. Those are not 4 groups of people that are known for their optimism and joie de vivre.
We hope you enjoyed that clip. The Other Side is on its mid-year break for a couple of weeks. We're back with new content on Friday, July 11. So make sure you join us then. In the meantime, we're going to keep dropping some of these best of clips from throughout the first half of 2025. We hope you enjoy.